into keywords. Doing even some basic keyword research will ensure that you're giving your content the best chance it has to be found in Google search. This also applies if you put any content on Pinterest because it's also a search engine. Using a keyword research tool will help you to figure out which keywords are more competitive and easier to rank for. It'll suggest alternative keywords that will be easier to rank for, show you related keywords that are helpful to include in your content, and also things like which articles are currently ranking for specific keywords. Basically, they give you a ton of information that you can use when you're planning out your content. The key here is to find keywords that aren't too competitive, but also that aren't too obscure so that no one's searching for them. The highest difficulty keywords will also have the highest volume of searches. Now, I don't want to discourage you from certain keywords that you may want to create for other reasons other than SEO traffic, but I just want to explain that some of them are very, very competitive, and you will also be competing against huge media publishers with whole teams of writers behind them for those top spots on Google. Okay, consider this keyword phrase, how to lose weight. This is going to be ultra competitive, and you're not going to rank for it anytime soon unless you do build a major publishing website. Consider instead starting out with some low to medium difficulty keywords. These are often keywords or phrases that have more words in them, and they're called medium or long tail keywords. For example, how to lose weight fast for women over 50, or keto diet for women with PCOS. There's no perfect strategy here, and you want to find a balance between what the data is showing you and what keywords or phrases are still very important for your audience. Some articles won't ever have a chance of ranking in search, and that's perfectly okay if you have other reasons for creating that content. Now, keyword research tools can also be very expensive, especially for the best ones that give you the most amount of data. But there are still some free options, and I'm going to include a link to some of those in the resources. So after you've selected your keywords, it's time to create your outline. Hey there, now that you've selected your keyword, it's time to think about what you're going to call this new article. Now, you don't have to decide on this completely right now. I usually come up with a working title when I'm first getting started, and then I put it up at the top of my outline. But when I'm finished with my first draft of my content, I usually revisit my title and make sure that it still suits me, or to make sure that it still accurately represents that content that I've written. Now, sometimes I decide to change this based on what I've written. So I want you to come up with a first draft of your article title, or maybe even 2 to 3 ideas, honestly. It's always good to really exercise those creative juices and to try to come up with at least 2 to 3 good ideas. Then you can choose the best one now or later whenever you finish writing. So here are some of my tips for choosing your article title. Number 1 is that it's really important to use your main keyword in your article title. This is super important for SEO. It's also important that it's your exact keyword or as close to it as possible and not some variation of it. For example, if your keyword is lose weight fast for women, your article title should include that exact keyword phrase in it. Like this, the top 10 easiest ways to lose weight fast for women, and not lose weight fast with the top 10 tips for women. Now, that is the absolute most important part about your title. Well, aside from number 2, which is to make sure that your headlines are the right amount of characters so that they don't get cut off in Google search results. This number is, of course, subject to change, but at the time that I'm recording this, the recommended number of characters for your article title is about 50 to 60. So make sure that you try to stay within that range of not getting cut off in Google search results. Now, the rest of the tips I'm going to give you here are optional, and it may depend on how long your keywords are. Lose weight fast for women is already a pretty long keyword phrase, and we can't really fit a whole lot else in here. But consider these other ways that you can spice up your title. Number 3 is to mention the purpose, goal, or result. Lose weight fast for women, 10-day diet challenge, or 10 pounds in 10 days. It communicates a lot more than the top 10 tips for women because it's more specific about the purpose and the result. You want to think about these things when you're trying to make your headline stand out against everyone else's. Number 4 is to consider using a number in your title if it's appropriate. Anytime that you have an article that's in a list format with the top 10 things or the 17 tips or whatever, you should mention that in the title. There are some statistics out there that I cannot quote right now that say that headlines are more clickable with numbers defining the content. Sometimes you can even throw a number in there even if the main part of your content isn't a list, like how to lose weight fast for women plus the 3 tips for success. Now, if you don't have a list or if this doesn't apply, don't worry about this one. Number 5 is that you can use parentheses or brackets to show emphasis or to clarify something. For example, lose weight fast for women, 10-day diet challenge. Or how to care for succulents, 3 steps to stop the killing. Number 6, consider adding the year to show relevancy. I think that this is helpful in some niches, maybe more so than others. I definitely see it a lot more in the business and financial content, but even articles like the top 10 books on weight loss for 2022 can make your content appear super relevant. Just make sure to update these articles with a new year each year so they don't appear to be outdated. Number 7 is to consider using buzzwords or power words or emotional words, whatever you want to call them. These are just other words that can really spice up your title. Here are some examples. Essential, effortless, inspirational, fun, mind-blowing, easy, simple, complete guide, cringeworthy, fabulous, powerful, proven, bizarre, actionable tips, free, guaranteed, discover, huge, everything you need, secrets, strategy, best, more effective. Okay, I think that's enough. You can Google headline power words or emotional words and get even more ideas. But using words like these in your titles can make them even more descriptive and more compelling. And speaking of compelling the click, one final thought that I want to leave you with in this lesson is to please avoid clickbait as much as possible. You know what I'm talking about, those news articles that start off something like this. You'll never believe what this mother did to her child, or the Netflix sci-fi you missed that will blow you away. These articles are sensationalizing normal things that shouldn't even be considered news, to be honest. They are created just to generate a ton of clicks, and they often do accomplish that. But the thing is, when you don't deliver a mind-blowing piece of content behind that title, people bounce from your website. And when your bounce rate goes up, your standing in the Google algorithm goes down. You absolutely should inspire and pique curiosity, but there is a limit here. So don't go overboard and sensationalize your content. Okay, like I said, get a working title here or 3, and then we'll move on to the outline. Then you can revisit your title later on when you're finished writing your content just to see if you want to make any changes. Okay, let's start writing. The first step is to write an outline for your content. In this outline, you're going to include your article title or proposed title ideas, the keyword or keywords that you're using, major headings or subheadings in your content, and really any other bullet points or notes that you want to add as you're creating the outline. This just ensures that you have a plan for what you want to say and that you don't end up making your article too fluffy or too off topic, and also that you include everything that the reader needs to know. People want to read structured and informative posts. They don't want to skim through fluff or have any of their time wasted. And I often get asked, how long does my content need to be? Well, for one, those keyword research tools will tell you exactly what the content length is from the top ranking articles. So it's a good idea to take a look at that information and to consider it. Otherwise, say what you need to say, get personal, but don't go off topic or off on tangents. When you're planning out headlines and subheadlines, consider using related keywords in those headlines for better SEO. Again, good keyword research tools will provide you with a lot of this information. Take a look at the top ranking content on Google and see what information they are including. Remember not to go down that path of being a carbon copy. Simply use this for inspiration purposes only and to make sure that you aren't leaving out anything important. But do make that article your own. Here is where I want to insert a reminder about your class project. I'd love to see an outline for one of your articles. Or if you're keen and want to upload a full article and have me take a look over it, I'll be glad to do that too. Check out the class resources for more information. And in the next lesson, we'll start actually writing your content. The writing part is really up to you, and it's going to look different for each individual person based on their writing style and their audience's needs. But I want to give you a few of my best writing tips for you to think about. Number 1 is to do what you can to get in your writing zone. You want to write well and you want to write quickly, ideally, so you can have time to focus on other aspects of your business or your project. So whether it's headphones on and focus playlist, or complete silence, or working from a cafe or your home office, do what you can to get into that zone and eliminate all distractions. That one's pretty obvious, but it's worth mentioning for those that don't have a lot of experience writing or pumping content out regularly. Number 2 is to write like you're talking to a friend or a colleague. We tend to want to talk like professionals to illustrate that we know what we're talking about. But in order to achieve that relatability that I talked about, you really need to take it down a notch and make the atmosphere more comfortable and familiar for your reader. Be open, be honest, even be vulnerable if it applies to the situation. That is how connections are built. And then my third tip is to remember that your reader is on a level 1 and you're often speaking from a level 10. Remember that you have the full picture. You're likely sharing information about problems that you have personally solved. You've got it already figured out, and we tend to forget about all those smaller nuances that our readers are still getting hung up on. We tend to skim over some parts that we know aren't necessary or important, but that doesn't mean that they aren't important to the reader at that time. And usually whenever we try to write at a level 1, we often still land somewhere around a 5 or a 6. A good way to summarize this concept is to think of your audience as being in point A, and you're generally writing from a point B perspective. And I'm actually going to dive much deeper into this in the next lesson because it's super important for a variety of reasons. So this is actually one of my biggest marketing secrets that I'm about to share with you. It's something that I discovered on my journey towards connecting better with my audience, marketing better, and selling better. Let's talk about this concept of A-B perspective. I'm going to illustrate first with an example of how it applies to weight loss because that's a niche that I have experience in. Your clients and readers are at a point A. They haven't fixed their problems yet. They're still trying to lose weight and they're not succeeding. They often don't know why they can't succeed or don't understand the full picture. They're overweight. You are at a point B. You fixed your problems. You have lost that weight and you have succeeded. You also most likely know why you've succeeded and you do understand the full picture. You're no longer overweight. Now you can share before and after photos of yourself, and some people will find it very inspirational. It's often very necessary for credibility. But it's probably going to do little more than give them some brief inspiration that will probably wear off pretty quickly. It's not super relatable because they're still overweight, right? They can imagine what that might be like when they do reach that goal, but they don't truly feel anything about that. So what are they feeling? Well, chances are you know this because you've been in their shoes in the past. What did you feel when you were overweight and nothing was working? Now that is the point A perspective. If you can share those personal thoughts and opinions, feelings, stories, struggles, and experiences from that point A perspective as it applies to them, that is what is going to hook them. You're connecting to how they feel right now and showing them the path out. So try to put yourself in this point A perspective as much as possible. And know that this applies to so many aspects of your business communications, including your articles, your other content, your emails, your products, your sales pages, and really every other place where marketing applies. Because relatability is everything. Now that you're finished writing your content, it's time to edit it. Well, if you've just finished, take a skim over to make sure it has everything that you want in there, but then take some space from it. Ideally, at least a day or overnight. This will give your brain a chance to rest and let you edit it with a fresh pair of eyes and a more open mind. You'll be able to get a better idea of how it will be received by your audience. Now, there are a few things you need to do when editing your content, including checking for grammar and punctuation, adding links, photos, and other references, formatting headings and other text, so bolding, italicizing, underlining, etc., SEO and mention of relevant keywords, and of course, readability and relatability. Check the description and resource area to see some recommended software and plugins to help you with some of these. There are some really great, awesome free tools that you can check out for getting help with your grammar and also that include SEO checklists to work through. These kinds of tools are super helpful because they can save you so much time and make your life so much easier. Now, one thing I do want to address here is specifically related to the readability of your content. Remember that people do like to skim content for important information. Not everyone is going to read every single word, many won't. So here are a few tips to make your content more readable. Number one, don't make paragraphs too long. It makes it harder to skim. Instead, break up your content in 1 to 3 sentence paragraphs. Number two, make that content easier to read by bolding, italicizing, and underlining, every few sentences or so. Use bullet points and make sure to make your headings bold and large enough to stand out. And then number three, add images where it makes sense, which is what we're going to talk about in the next lesson. Hey there, I want to make sure I included a lesson in here about images because it's a question I get asked a lot about. Where can I find professional photos? Can I take my own? Should I take my own? First of all, if you can take your own and they're really great photos, then absolutely do so. It's another way to make sure that your content is unique. But for everyone who doesn't have the time or the skills to do this, like myself, thankfully there are a lot of options these days to get free professional stock photos. Too many options, to be honest. It can be pretty overwhelming. The key is to find a good site or two that has the largest selection so that you don't have to go through 5 different sites to find exactly what you're looking for. Trying to find the perfect stock photo to illustrate what you're trying to convey can be really difficult, especially if you're really picky about it like I am. And this isn't just for your articles. You'll probably need images for other things like social media marketing, email marketing, sales marketing, etc. Now, I'll include a list of some of my favorite resources for images in the class resources, so make sure to check that out. When it comes to adding images to your articles, here are a couple of tips. Number one is to try to find photos that look and feel more natural and less artificial. We tend to want to show photos of people smiling to illustrate happiness, but sometimes showing faces of strangers just comes off as really unrelatable. They can often have an unfamiliar or clinical feel, like the images that you see in doctors' offices or in ads or inserts for prescription drugs. Number two is to make sure to resize and optimize before uploading to your website. When you add an image to your website, you want it to be the smallest possible file size without sacrificing too much quality. So really large, high-resolution photos take up a lot of space and they take a long time to load. This can cause your entire page to load slower and can cause people to bounce before they get a chance to actually read your content. So first you want to resize that image to make it smaller, then you want to compress that image to make the file size itself even smaller. I'll include a couple of free tools in the class resources to help you resize and optimize your images. And then lastly, number three, remember that fewer images are sometimes better. You don't want to go overboard and have your images take away from your written content. Only add as many as you really need to break up the text, illustrate a concept, or evoke feelings. And then one more thing, make sure to add descriptions or alt text to your images when you upload them. This is another really basic concept for SEO 101, which is what we'll talk about in the next lesson. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about SEO. Now, this is a deep, dark rabbit hole with a lot of underground pathways, some of which are super legit, and some look like shortcuts that abruptly end in disaster. We're not going to go that deep because that's another course or even 3, and it's also a moving target. But it's at least important to make sure that you have the basics down and covered in each of your articles to give them their best shot at ranking. Some of the basics of SEO include keyword research, like we already mentioned before. Make sure to write articles with a specific keyword or phrase and also include other relevant keywords throughout your content. Don't stuff them too often, but make sure to make your main keywords appear at least a few times throughout your text. Next is your content length. There aren't any specific guidelines here, but as I mentioned, make sure to look at the content length of other articles already ranking just to get a general idea. Next is headlines and subheadings. I already mentioned that you need to have them when we talked about outlines, but it's also important to add the right heading tags to your content. This shows Google what the hierarchy of your content looks like. Next is categorizing your articles. If you have a blog or multiple articles on your website, it's a good idea to separate them into different categories. For example, recipes, fitness, dieting, etc. Next is adding relevant and helpful links to your content. This includes both internal links, which link to other content on your website, and external links, which link to other websites. Internal links are good for building SEO on your content and getting more eyeballs on your articles, and external links are also necessary to show that you're referencing relevant and helpful resources from around the web. Now, there's a lot to think about here, and this doesn't really do much more than scratch the surface. But the good news is that there are free plugins that give you so much of this information in a checklist format that will help you detect exactly what's missing from your content. I'll link my favorite resources for this in the class resources section. After you've ticked off some of your SEO checkboxes, it's time to add a call to action to your article, which is what we'll talk about in the next lesson. Okay, one more thing before you hit that publish button. Let's talk about adding a call to action or CTA to your article. Every single article or any piece of content or communication that you share should have one call to action at the end, an action that you want them to take after reading your content. At this point, there's the beginning of a relationship forming, and if they've made it to the end of your content, they're going to be more likely to want to learn more. Now, you have a variety of options here, including links to another relevant article or two, links to a podcast, a YouTube channel, or some other platform, an email opt-in so they can subscribe, or even a link to a relevant product or service. Ideally, you only have one big call to action at the end of your content. If you include multiple, people might be less likely to take action or feel divided on what to do next. At the end of my articles, I like to include a link to the next article that they can check out. Now, I already have an email opt-in form that displays at the beginning of my content and also at the footer at the end, so I know that they've likely already seen my email opt-in, or that would have been my first preference. Now, it's also a great place to link a product if you're selling one, but that can also depend on the price of the product. If it's above $200 or so, people probably aren't likely to buy it after just reading one article. Your email list is a better place to sell a higher priced product, and therefore your email opt-in should be prioritized here. But if you've launched a new podcast or YouTube channel, you could also direct people to that platform to check out other content. You have options here, but try to limit this to 1 to 2 actions tops. After you've added your call to action, it's time to publish and promote, which is what we'll talk about in the next lesson. Okay, you're ready to make your content live. It's time to hit that publish button. Make sure that you're publishing new content often, at least once or twice a month if Google SEO is important to you. Google SEO is important because it's free traffic there for the taking. It can take a lot of work, but the rewards are worth it. But whether or not Google SEO is even a big part of your strategy, you'll likely also need another platform or two in your arsenal. And the good news is that now that you've created this great piece of content, it's relatively easy to recycle that information for promotion on other platforms. You can create a YouTube video discussing the topic, record a podcast episode, create a few Pinterest pins, make a few TikTok videos or an Instagram story, write an email and promote it to your audience. Now, you don't need and shouldn't do all of these things with every single piece of content that you write, but choose 1 to 2 platforms and recycle your content for these platforms. Make sure to add an email opt-in to your articles so that people do have an easy opportunity to learn more from you. And lastly, remember to update your content. Almost every piece of content that you write needs to be updated. It's important for Google SEO and just to show your audience that your content is still relevant. And honestly, you'll be surprised at how much things change in even just a year or two. Your relationship with your audience will change, the world will change, and all of this impacts what you say and how you say it. Every time I read over content from even just a year or two ago, I sometimes cringe and think, why did I write that? Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. So anyway, make sure to always update your content at least once every year or two to make sure it's still as awesome and relevant as possible. And of course, that it isn't from 1986, right? You want that updated year to always be displaying on your posts. Hey there, let's talk about page speed. A bit of a boring topic, really, but it is really important. Now, if you're just getting started writing content, this actually might not be super important just yet. It's more important when you're optimizing what you're trying to do, like when you're writing a lot more content, trying to get it to rank in Google, or just trying to generally get more traffic to your website. Page speed, or rather the time that it takes content to load for a user, is really important because if it is too slow, people are not going to wait and your bounce rates are going to go up. And Google does pay attention to those because they want a really good user experience for their users. Now, many factors are related to page speed, and some of them are going to be somewhat out of your control, honestly, if you aren't a website coder. For example, some website themes out there are much faster or slower than others. This is just due to the coding that was used to build these websites. Many themes are super easy to use and super customizable, but these also tend to be a bit slower. Now, super successful websites with big pockets often have their websites custom built to maximize the speed and efficiency. But let's talk about the rest of us and some of the things that you can control. Number 1 is taking care with the images that you upload to your site. This is the most important. You want to always make sure to resize images to the lowest file size possible, and then also compress the image to reduce the file size. Then you can upload it to your website. Having too many images or too many really large, high-resolution photos will put a serious drag on your page. Now, there are tons of free online tools to both resize and compress your images, and I'll link my favorites in the resources. Something else that you can do is to look into some free plugins that help with page speed. Whether this is for page caching, image loading, there are tons of free plugins out there. I'll also link a few of those, my favorites in the resources. And then lastly, you can use a page speed tool like Google Page Insights to see what your pages score and see what improvements are recommended. Page speed tools can give you a ton of insight, but I'll warn you right now that a lot of them probably will go over your head. They do mine anyway. Now, I've been down that rabbit hole a few times, and I've actually also hired people in the past to help me with page speed because it can get really complicated really fast. Now, I don't want to send you down any rabbit holes today, don't worry. So please don't stress this. If your scores aren't perfect, they're not going to end up being perfect. I've had plenty of success with my websites when the scores weren't great at all, so it's not that big of a deal. I really just want page speed to be something that you're aware of and make sure that you have the tools to check on this from time to time. And please do mind the things that you can control, like uploading the images to your website because it's one of the biggest factors impacting your page speed. Hey there, let's talk about repurposing content. Now, I touched on this a little bit earlier when I mentioned that after writing an article, you can repurpose it and make a YouTube video, a social story, podcast episode, etc. But I also want to make sure to emphasize that this also works the other way around. If you have a podcast or a YouTube channel, you can also turn that content into an article. I sometimes use the scripts from my YouTube videos and turn them into articles. And every single time I published a new podcast episode, I created a dedicated post on my website for that episode, along with a summary of what was talked about in the episode, the show notes, the links, and more. Repurposing content is a really great way to get more content in front of your audience while also saving you a ton of time. Because it takes a lot of time to write a new article from scratch, right? So if you were to create and sell an ebook, which I also have another whole course on, by the way, you could also pick out topics from your ebook and you could write content about those subtopics on your website with the purpose of helping to sell your ebook. And remember that a lot of your content will likely have to be updated as well at some point. And this can also be another form of repurposing content when you change an article or you add to existing articles just to make them a little bit better. And when you do that, you can also send out a new email to your audience, letting them know that you have updated that content and you have even more relevant content to share with them. And especially for all those people that are new to your audience, your email list, and they may have not seen that content before anyway. Another really great way to repurpose content is to use bits and pieces of your best articles to write in your emails. Now, I do this whenever I'm sending out a broadcast about a new article that I've written, and whenever I'm creating emails for my sales funnels. I talk more about both of those in much greater length in my course on email marketing. But I very often copy bits of my articles into my emails just to save myself a little bit of time. So make sure that you repurpose this content whenever you can, just to save yourself some time.